Nation, another glorious day here. I got my buddy Brent. Gotta love it. Brent, we're still gonna talk about that QC stuff, aren't we?
Yes, yes. This is still the quality control series.
Cool. So what do you want to convey today?
We're gonna have the most exciting meeting or video that you've ever witnessed about conveyor belts and how they affect concrete
That's
quality
not hard.
control.
I don't think I've ever witnessed one on conveyor belts, but we set the bar really low there, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
No offense to any manufacturer of conveyor belt systems who might have done a video. We're just fooling around because we have to from time to time. Yes. Keeps our brain space good and wonderful.
Yeah, so
conveyor systems.
Yeah, we have to get mostly rock and sand are the ones that use belts more than anything else. So we have to use conveyor belts to move rock and sand from one place to another at a concrete plant.
Do you have a red light?
Like rock sand?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That was great.
Well, you said rock sand. I was just sorry. Musical lyrics bounce in my head a lot.
All right. So we're going to talk about problems that can occur with conveyor belts at your concrete plant, and how they can potentially impact quality control or the consistency or quality of the concrete that you're making. And they're often overlooked because conveyor belts are one of those things that do their job and do their job well every day in, day out until they don't.
How are you an expert on this? Y'all never had any issues at your batch plant.
We hid those behind the scenes. So
don't look behind the curtain.
Yeah, exactly. So believe it or not, a conveyor belt often is used to move that rock and sand up to, in a dry batch plant, the truck itself, or in a central mix plant into a mixer. And those belts are going to have, imagine, 2 cylinders with a belt wrapped around them. Usually one's higher than the other. And those cylinders have really impressive names. They call the one near the top the head pulley, and the one near the bottom the tail pulley. And there's a motor either on the bottom or on the top, depending on where you're driving that belt rotation. So again, those names should be pretty easy to remember. I don't know if that's the official name. That's just what we always called them, but
it is official now.
It is official now.
They're now known as the head pulley and the tail pulley.
So the belt rides along in a series of what are known as idlers or rollers, where you have rollers that the belt travels across that should be functioning properly, greased, and they're basically hollow steel cans.
You know, it'd be impressive.
What's that?
There's something behind us that showed that.
Yeah, it would. It would. And the operation of the return rollers on the bottom, you have the rollers on the top, rollers on the bottom. The operation of both sets of rollers needs to be smooth and non-binding, and the belt needs to travel freely. To do that, we have grease fittings.
Right.
On the various rollers.
Did you get a monkey?
We have monkeys that grease the belts at.
I did that grease monkey thing for Fred because you know he's going to put a monkey. Yes, he's going to put him. Find some grease with it too.
Yeah, hopefully he'll find one with a grease gun even.
I don't know that that's possible, but now we have grease monkeys.
Yes, we do. So greasing of those rollers is important because I have seen what happens when you don't, and when you don't, they will seize up eventually. And then they become a place for abrasion to happen between the belt and the roller. And those rollers or idlers, I have seen this, and it's awful. I have seen them peel back like an onion and rip a conveyor belt. Once that thin skin that's on those idlers is breached, it can peel back and become a knife edge that cuts that rubber of the belt. Now, so greasing of the rollers is important. Greasing of the head and tail pulleys is important. Checking your motors is important. Also important is tracking of the belt. There are tracking arms that are on the belt that allow you to adjust which way the belt goes in that trough of rollers as it's riding up. So if you tighten this side and loosen this side, you'll make it go this way or that way. Now, one thing that a lot of people don't know is that belt will track differently if it's empty versus if it's loaded. So it's always important.
Depending on where you get the load sitting at, it's going to pull one way or the other. So you have to adjust on that. I got you.
So it's important to make sure that you have it tracking well, both empty and loaded, because that empty belt is going to be running from time to time with nothing on it. You know, when you first start the load process, it runs for a second before the rock and sand drops out of the scale onto the belt to go up the belt.
Well, then you're gonna run it dry when you're done as well. So you got a couple of, okay.
Exactly. So another thing to pay particularly close attention to is any splices that you have in that belt. So the belt, as I was saying, is a continuous, goes around the head pulley, tail pulley, rides on the rollers. Well, the belt's got to be put on there somehow.
Right.
And sometimes that can be through a seamless belt where they vulcanize it in some way.
You release the pressure off the rollers and then put it in like you would like in a car or
Right, exactly.
other motors. Okay.
Perfect explanation. I had not thought about the car analogy, but
Yeah, you just pull the pulley down and give you some slack, put the belt on, tighten the pulley back up, pulls it back out, straightens out. So same thing.
yep, exactly. Sometimes though they have metal splices like a zipper.
Okay.
And those metal splices are points of weakness on that belt, and they can begin to catch as it goes over the head pulley and starts its return. Those start wearing out. They can catch on a roller and cause a roller damage, or actually damage the belt itself, causing the belt to come apart. Now, all this is important because of the impacts that it can have on quality. One of the things that can happen is you can lose material. If your scrapers, you've got some scrapers, especially down where the scale is, you're going to have some skirts that run, they're usually rubber, that are going to be impacting the belts, or impact is the wrong word, touching the belt surface. And those scrapers keep the material from riding up the sides when it's first dumped. So when it's dumped out of the scale, it could splash over, you lose material. You can also lose material when the rock and sand, mostly on the fines, when the belt goes past the head pulley and starts its journey underneath, there's some scrapers underneath that
To catch
catch it and keep it clean.
Right. Of moisture. Okay.
Right, exactly. So you can lose material, but you can also have situations like we've had. That tail pulley often sits in a pit,
Right.
and those pits can get water in them during a rain event or wash.
What's rain? I don't. Water fill up a pit?
Yeah.
Crazy? That never happens. Don't you just pull the plug?
So if you end up, if you end up having ideally you're going to have a drain plug in the bottom of that pit, right? But if you end up with a tail pulley that is partially or completely submerged by water, it's going to carry water up that belt and can throw off a water cement ratio. It can also potentially cause problems with not just the water, but it can cause problems with, if there's a motor on that tail pulley, you can burn a motor up and then you're down for a long time. So the first issue is loss of materials and that submerged tail pulley. The next thing that can be a major problem is that can lead to a plant shutdown. So if you've got a belt, a charging belt especially, that gets ripped because you're not doing your preventative maintenance,
Right.
or you've got a submerged tail pulley, or you've got some other issue with that conveyor, it can shut a plant down, and that can create the need to finish a job from a plant that's further away. For instance, you could have some cold joint issues or hot
Well,
loads.
let's say if you're in a remote location, even if you don't have another plant, cold joints and everything else are going to happen. It's creating you some other issues.
So for a QC manager, I know it's not your everyday job to look at conveyor belts most likely, but it's always good to be best friends with that plant maintenance guy that is putting his eyeballs on those, so that that plant maintenance person understands the quality impacts of that conveyor belt running the way it needs to.
Well, even if it's not, it does not hurt as you're doing your checks for sands and rocks and things like that, just to walk around and make sure everything looks good. And, you know, more eyes on it, the better.
Absolutely. And one of the greatest pieces of advice an old concrete batch man told me back when I was a 16 or 17-year-old kid.
That was back way a long time ago.
was.
Phew.
Yeah.
Like 70, 80 years ago.
That was nice, Josh. Thank you. Told you it was going to be an entertaining video. One of the most important things that he trained me on and taught me was learn how your plant sounds when it's running properly. Because one of the things that will happen if you get a splice going bad on a conveyor belt, you're going to start hearing a clicking noise as it goes across those rollers.
Right.
If that clicking noise wasn't there before and now all of a sudden it is, then it's an indicator that you need to check something. If you hear high-pitched squealing, that could be that the belt's slipping. You know, the tail pulley's turning, but the belt is slipping across, so it may need adjustment. So learn how your plant sounds. Think of it as almost like a living, breathing creature.
No, don't think of it like your car. You ever take it to a mechanic, you're like, well, what's it doing? Well, I can tell you what sound it makes. And sometimes they don't hear it, but it's something that you have heard your car for so many years, you know something is going on. Same thing applies. You know your plant, you know what it sounds like. If there's a different sound, something's going on.
Yes.
So yeah, go find it.
Absolutely. So I know I talked most of the time there, Josh, but I appreciate the questions that you asked and everything. You got any other questions before we wrap this one up?
No, I mean, you know, just pay attention to all your conveyors and check your head pulley, your tail pulleys, check your motors, your rollers, fittings.
Yes.
So, I mean, just one other, I guess I do have one question. Short of a daily walkthrough, I mean, how often are you really trying to grease those fittings? How many times are you kind of doing your eyeball check on the rollers and things like that, just from a maintenance standpoint? Weekly, daily, monthly?
That's a good question. And it's going to be volume dependent in a lot of ways, but
well, yeah, if you're only batching one truck out every couple days, it's all different than if you're doing.
Yeah, if you're doing 20 to 50 yards a day, you might be able to get away with a little longer, but weekly is what we tried to do to make sure that you're greasing all the grease fittings and double check, at least putting eyeballs on it. Now, there was a daily inspection that we did where you would look for major problems, like the water in the pit.
Right.
You know, that's something you
need to know right then.
You want to know if something's different, yeah. So, but real preventative maintenance should be scheduled, and weekly is a good rotation in most cases. But check with your plant manufacturer also.
Like, subscribe if you got any questions. Brent Rollins is the man of the hour today, so please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, John.